Jake loved these moments with Max. The warm afternoon sun bathed their suburban street in golden light. As father and son biked slowly down the quiet lane, Max, just 7, pedaled ahead with that carefree grin Jake knew too well. His son's wild mop of curls, bouncing with every push of the pedals. It was their favorite time, just the two of them, the hum of summer insects, and the peaceful rhythm of a neighborhood where life felt safe. Jake glanced at the house they'd just left, the modest but neat place he'd worked so hard to call home. The manicured lawns and freshly painted fences were overseen by the HOA board, led by Karen, an uncompromising woman known to some as Karen the Queen. Jake often clashed with her over petty rules, but today he pushed those frustrations aside. Today was about Max. As they rounded the corner, Jake's heart swelled watching Max weave expertly between parked cars, his laughter ringing in the air. But then, without warning, an unsettling noise ripped through the calm. Tires screeched, grinding against asphalt with a terrifying shriek. Jake's head snapped toward the source. Karen's black SUV came barreling down the street, far too fast, tires smoking as she jerked the wheel. For a split second, Jake thought she was trying to slow down, but then the vehicle lunged forward, directly at Max. "Max, get out of the way!" Jake shouted, sprinting toward his son, but his voice was lost in the chaos. The sickening thud echoed, a collision that seemed to freeze time. Max flew off his bike, landing hard on the street as Karen's car screeched to a halt a few feet away. A stunned silence blanketed the street. Jake dropped to his knees beside Max, heart pounding as he checked his son's limp form. Tears welled in Max's eyes, and he whimpered, clutching his leg. "Dad!" "It hurts," Max gasped. Jake's breath caught, but he fought to stay calm. "I'm right here, buddy. Help is coming." Karen stepped out of her SUV, face pale, but hardening instantly. Instead of rushing to help, her gaze locked on Jake with an accusing glare. "You weren't watching your kid," she snapped sharply, voice cold as ice. "If you'd been paying attention, this never would have happened." Jake stared at her, disbelief and anger rising like a storm. "He was right there. Your car came flying down the street." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I had the right of way. You let him run into my car." The neighborhood started to gather, whispers spreading like wildfire. Some neighbors hurried to help Max, while others stared with a mix of curiosity and judgment. The atmosphere thickened with tension. A man stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling 911. This isn't just an accident." Karen's jaw clenched. "I'm the HOA president. I know what's best for this neighborhood. Don't listen to him." Jake's mind raced. He felt the weight of the crowd's eyes, some filled with sympathy, others with suspicion. He knew Karen's reputation for manipulation, for twisting stories to keep control. As the sirens wailed in the distance, the neighborhood's peaceful facade cracked. Underneath, old grudges and alliances stirred, waiting for this moment to erupt. Jake held Max's hand tightly, his voice steady but fierce. "I'll get to the truth, whatever it takes." Karen watched, a shadow of menace flickering in her eyes. This was far from over. Jake sat stiffly in the sterile hospital waiting room, his eyes fixed on the door to the emergency room. The hours since the accident blurred into an agonizing haze. Max's small hand rested in his, pale and trembling, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. The doctors had said Max was stable, but Jake's gut twisted with fear. The pain in his chest wasn't just for Max's injuries. It was for what was to come. The neighborhood had already begun to spin its own version of the story. Word traveled fast, like wildfire across dry brush. On social media, whispers of careless, dad, and reckless kid began to surface. Karen had not wasted a moment. Using her position as HOA president, she had started a quiet but fierce campaign to paint Jake as the negligent father whose distraction caused the accident. Jake's phone buzzed relentlessly with messages, some supportive, but many laced with judgment and venom. "You should watch your kid better," one read. Another, more vicious. "Maybe your son is lucky Karen didn't run over you too." He swallowed hard. But the most painful part was seeing some neighbors' faces at the hospital. Friends turned, distant, their eyes filled with doubt or fear of crossing Karen's influence. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that beneath Karen's icy calm was something darker. Over the years, he had glimpsed her temper, the way she wielded control like a weapon. But now, with Max's future hanging in the balance, Jake vowed to uncover the truth behind her cold accusations. That night, alone in his dimly lit living room, Jake scrolled through the neighborhood Facebook group. Karen had posted a carefully worded message expressing concern for Max, but warning the community against reckless behavior near the streets. Jake's jaw tightened. This wasn't sympathy. It was a calculated power move. His phone rang suddenly, jolting him. It was Mia, a neighbor who had always been quietly kind but cautious around the HOA politics. "Jake, I'm so sorry about Max," she said softly. "Listen, I've been hearing some things about Karen. Things no one talks about. Reckless driving, temper outbursts. But she's got everyone scared. You're not alone in this." Her words sparked a flicker of hope in Jake's chest. "Thanks, Mia. I don't know what to believe anymore," Jake confessed. "Just be careful. Some folks around here have secrets. I'll see what I can find out." As Jake hung up, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The neighborhood he thought he knew was shifting beneath his feet. Days passed. Max's condition improved slowly, but Jake's life grew more complicated. Karen's supporters organized, holding secret meetings and spreading rumors that Jake was unstable, that his past mistakes explained everything. At the same time, Jake discovered strange gaps in the neighborhood's surveillance footage. The cameras near the accident site had inexplicably failed that day, just when he needed answers. The most suspicion gnawed at him. One evening as Jake returned home, he noticed Karen's SUV parked near the mailbox. She was on her phone, staring into the distance, with a flicker of unease on her face. Jake's instincts screamed that this accident was no simple tragedy. His son lay upstairs, recovering, innocent and vulnerable, while a web of lies and power plays threatened to engulf their lives. But Jake refused to be silenced. Somewhere beneath the polished lawns and manicured hedges, the truth waited to be uncovered, and he was determined to find it. The days after the accident felt like Jake was living in a nightmare that refused to end. Max's hospital room was a small fortress of beeping machines and whispered prayers. But outside those walls, the real battle was raging, and Jake was losing ground fast. Rumors spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Every whispered conversation seemed to carry a poison-laced barb. If Jake had been watching his kid, this wouldn't have happened. Max was always running wild. No surprise something bad caught up with him. Jake overheard these words in grocery stores, parks, even at the hospital cafeteria. It wasn't just Karen's whispers anymore. It was an entire community turning its back. Jake's phone was a constant barrage of messages. Some offered sympathy, but most carried suspicion and veiled threats. Anonymous texts warned him to drop the fight if he valued his family's safety. His social media pages exploded with hateful comments, mostly from neighbors rallying behind Karen's carefully spun narrative. Karen's own posts were cold and calculated. She portrayed herself as a victim of Jake's recklessness, painting him as a dangerous distraction and unfit father. She controlled the HOA's newsletter, twisting the accident into a cautionary tale about parental responsibility. Jake's frustration boiled over one evening during a neighborhood barbecue. He overheard Karen speaking quietly with some board members. "He's unstable. If we don't shut him down, this whole community will fall apart," she said, her voice a venomous whisper. Jake clenched his fists, fury mixing with desperation. How far would she go to protect herself? He had to find a way to fight back. That night, Jake's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an anonymous tip. Check the HOA archives. Karen's past is darker than you think. Curiosity mingled with fear. Jake wasn't sure if this was a trap or a lifeline. He decided to visit the HOA office the next morning under the guise of picking up some paperwork. The building was a sterile, unwelcoming place, filled with stacks of folders and files, an endless maze of neighborhood records. As Jake sifted through the archives, his heart raced. Buried deep in the files, he found multiple complaints against Karen. Reports of reckless driving, aggressive behavior, and intimidation tactics that had been quietly dismissed or buried by the HOA board. There were notes about an incident years earlier when Karen had nearly hit a child with her car, but had escaped any consequences thanks to her influence. A cold wave of realization hit Jake. Karen's car accident with Max wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a pattern she'd carefully hidden. Before Jake could dig deeper, footsteps echoed behind him. He spun around to see Lisa, one of the few board members who hadn't fully sided with Karen. "You shouldn't be here," Lisa whispered, urgently. "If Karen finds out you're digging, she'll come after you." Jake nodded, clutching the files tightly. "I have to know the truth. For Max." Lisa's eyes flickered with sympathy. "Be careful. This goes beyond petty HOA drama." Back at home, Jake's resolve hardened. He wasn't just fighting for his son's recovery anymore. He was fighting to expose a woman who'd been poisoning the community for years. But the stakes were rising. That night, a strange car idled outside Jake's house long after midnight. Shadows moved, and his phone buzzed again with another ominous message. "Stop digging or else." Jake's breath caught. Fear tried to claw its way in, but he pushed it down. The neighborhood was no longer the peaceful place he once knew. It had become a battleground, and Jake was ready to fight. Jake's fingers trembled as he plugged in his laptop, the weight of the files from the HOA office heavy on his mind. He couldn't ignore the cold truth. Karen's past wasn't just troubling, it was dangerous. Yet the missing surveillance footage near the accident site gnawed at him like an open wound. How could the cameras have simply failed at the most crucial moment? Something didn't add up. Determined to get answers, Jake reached out to Mia, the kind neighbor who had first hinted at Karen's darker side. They agreed to meet under the guise of a casual coffee chat, but both knew it was a covert operation. In the dim corner of a small cafe, Mia leaned in, her voice low. "I did some digging on my own," she said, eyes darting around. "There's talk about the cameras being tampered with. Some folks say Karen's influence runs deeper than just the HOA." Jake's heart pounded. "Tampered how? Who would do that?" Mia hesitated. "That's the scary part. Some people think Karen's got allies willing to do whatever it takes to protect her, even if it means destroying evidence." Jake swallowed hard. This wasn't just about a reckless accident anymore. It was a calculated cover-up. That night, they drove to the accident site, a stretch of road lined with the same surveillance cameras that mysteriously stopped recording. Mia pulled out her phone and played back the few seconds of footage that remained from a nearby private security camera. The image was grainy, but it showed Karen's SUV speeding down the street, the driver's attention elsewhere, her phone clearly in her hand. Jake's pulse quickened as he watched the undeniable proof of distraction. But just as the SUV reached Max, the footage abruptly cut out. "That's not a coincidence," Mia said grimly. Someone wanted that part erased. Jake knew they had a battle on their hands, not just against Karen, but against a wall of silence and fear. The neighborhood was fracturing. Some residents whispered support for Jake, while others clung tightly to Karen's narrative, afraid of crossing the powerful HOA president. The following days brought a wave of unsettling events. Jake found his mailbox rifled through. His car tires were slashed, and more than once, he caught fleeting glimpses of unfamiliar cars trailing him through the streets. Karen's power wasn't just about rules and fines anymore. It was intimidation. Plain and simple, but Jake refused to back down. With Mia's help, he began organizing a secret meeting with neighbors who wanted the truth. The group was small, but growing, a quiet resistance forming beneath the surface. At the next HOA meeting, tension crackled like electricity. Jake stood before the board, his voice steady, but filled with fire. "There's been a deliberate attempt to cover up what really happened," he declared. "The surveillance footage was tampered with. I have evidence Karen was distracted at the time of the accident. We owe it to Max, and to every family here, to uncover the truth." The room erupted in murmurs, some shocked, others angry. Karen's face flushed with fury as she rose to defend herself. "This is slander," she snapped. "Jake is desperate to shift blame. I demand these baseless accusations stop." But the seed of doubt had been planted. After the meeting, Jake received a text from an unknown number. "You're stirring a hornet's nest. Be careful." He glanced at the message, heart racing, but his resolve was unwavering. Max was counting on him. As the neighborhood's facade of perfection cracked, Jake realized this was more than a fight for justice. It was a war against a darkness lurking beneath manicured lawns and white picket fences, and he was ready to shine a light on it. The next HOA meeting was unlike any before. The community hall buzzed with tension, every seat filled with neighbors itching for answers, eager for a reckoning. Jake sat near the front, his hands clenched into fists, eyes locked on Karen as she entered the room. The once untouchable HOA president looked smaller under the harsh fluorescent lights, her icy mask beginning to crack. Jake rose when called upon, voice steady but charged with emotion. "We all want what's best for our neighborhood," he began. "But we cannot pretend the truth doesn't matter. The accident that injured my son wasn't a moment of carelessness on my part. Karen was driving recklessly and distracted." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jake could feel eyes burning into him, some in support, others skeptical. Karen stood to respond, her voice sharp as a knife. "I am a dedicated community leader. This is a personal attack designed to destroy my reputation." She paused, then leveled her gaze at Jake. "You want to make me a villain, but the truth will come out, and when it does, you'll regret this." Her words sent a ripple of unease through the room. Suddenly, Mia stepped forward, holding her phone like a shield. "We have footage showing Karen was on her phone just before the accident. The cameras near the scene were tampered with. This isn't just an accident. This was negligence." Gasps echoed. Karen's face flushed with fury, but her composure faltered. That footage is doctored. Fabricated, she hissed. Jake caught the flicker of fear in her eyes. The mask was slipping. Before the room could erupt, Karen revealed a bombshell. You all don't know everything about Jake. He's not as innocent as he wants you to believe. There are things in his past. Things that should make you question his credibility. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Jake's stomach dropped. What could she be talking about? And how much damage could she do with secrets he'd long buried? Karen's revelation was a calculated blow. She knew this was her last desperate defense. But Jake wasn't finished. Taking a deep breath, he met her gaze. If you want to bring up my past, fine. But it doesn't change the fact that you endangered my son. That's the truth we all need to face. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Some neighbors looked conflicted, others clearly taking Karen's side. Just then, an elderly woman from the back stood up. I've lived here for 20 years. I've seen Karen's behavior, her outbursts, her reckless driving. This isn't the first time she's put children at risk. Her voice cracked, but her words cut through the tension like a blade. The meeting descended into chaos, voices raised and accusations flying. But through the noise, one thing was clear. Karen's carefully cultivated image was crumbling. After the meeting, Jake walked outside into the cool night air, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Karen's threat still echoed in his mind, her promise that he'd regret this fight. But Jake's determination only deepened. Later that night, as Jake sat beside Max's hospital bed, his phone buzzed with a new message. This one different from the others. You don't know the half of it. Karen's actions have a reason. A secret buried deep. Be ready. Jake's heart pounded. The battle was far from over. Beneath the calm neighborhood streets lay a secret more dangerous than anyone imagined. And Jake was about to uncover the truth that could change everything. The cryptic message haunted Jake as he stared at his phone in the dim light of Max's hospital room. Who had sent it? And what secret could Karen possibly be hiding that was so dangerous, so deep, that it explained everything? Determined to find out, Jake decided to dig deeper into Karen's past, far beyond the HOA complaints and the reckless driving incidents. He started by calling an old contact from his days working in real estate, someone who might have access to public records and hidden histories. The next day, Jake met with the contact, a sharp-eyed woman named Vanessa. She sifted through online archives and courthouse records, her fingers flying over the keyboard. After an hour, Vanessa looked up, eyes serious. You weren't kidding. Karen's history goes way beyond neighborhood disputes. There's a record of a lawsuit from almost a decade ago, a hit and run. Someone was injured, and Karen was the driver. The case was quietly settled, and the record sealed. Jake's breath caught. Why wasn't this ever public? Vanessa shrugged. High-powered lawyers, influence, money. It vanished from the public eye almost overnight. The pieces were falling into place, but the question remained. Why hadn't anyone spoken out before? Why now? That evening, Jake found himself back at the accident site, walking the stretch of road bathed in twilight. The shadows lengthened as he pieced together what he knew: Karen's reckless driving, the tampered footage, the silenced lawsuits. It was more than negligence. It was a pattern of dangerous behavior, protected by fear and power. Suddenly, a noise behind him made Jake whirl around. A figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Mia. I thought you might be here, she said, quietly. There's something you need to see. She handed him a small envelope. Inside were photographs, grainy but telling, of Karen at a late-night gathering months ago. What caught Jake's eye wasn't just the party. It was who she was with a man he recognized from the neighborhood, one of Karen's closest allies on the HOA board, holding what looked like a briefcase full of documents. Jake's mind raced. Was this some kind of deal? A bribe? A secret pact? Mia nodded, reading his thoughts. There's more. Karen's been quietly buying properties in the neighborhood. Rumors say she plans to flip them all, forcing longtime residents out to make way for luxury developments. The HOA fines, the intimidation. It's all part of a bigger plan. Jake clenched his jaw. The accident, the lies, the threats. It was all a cover for something far more sinister. As they spoke, a sudden noise nearby froze them both. A car door slamming shut, tires rolling away. Jake's heart hammered. They weren't alone. That night, Jake's house was hit again. This time, a window was shattered with a rock tossed inside. On the glass, a message scrawled in red, "Stop now or worse comes." Fear pressed down on Jake like a heavy weight, but the fire inside him burned brighter. Max's accident was no accident. It was a warning, a call to uncover a dark secret festering beneath their idyllic neighborhood. The next morning, Jake made a decision. He couldn't face this alone. He needed allies, people willing to stand up to Karen and expose the truth. But trust was fragile, and every step deeper into the shadows brought new dangers. As he looked at Max, still fragile but fighting, Jake vowed, no matter the cost, he would bring Karen's secrets to light. The days following the vandalism at Jake's house were a relentless storm of fear and determination. Every creak in the night, every unfamiliar face in the neighborhood felt like a threat. But Jake's resolve only grew stronger. Max was healing, slowly, each small victory a beacon of hope. But the shadows lurking in their once peaceful community threatened to snuff out that light. Jake gathered the small group of neighbors who had quietly stood by him, Mia, Lisa, and a few others. They met in secret, whispering strategies over coffee in dimly lit kitchens and back porches. We need proof, Jake said. Something undeniable that will expose Karen and her allies once and for all. Mia nodded. I've been talking to some people, former HOA employees, even a few contractors who've worked on Karen's properties. They're scared, but they want change. We just need to give them courage. Lisa added, and we need to protect ourselves. Karen won't stop until she's crushed anyone who stands in her way. Jake agreed. Their meetings became a blend of planning and vigilance, their quiet rebellion growing beneath the calm surface of the neighborhood. One night, Mia brought a revelation. I found an email chain between Karen and her HOA allies. They're discussing ways to silence dissent, intimidation tactics, legal threats, even surveillance on those who oppose them. Jake's blood ran cold. This is bigger than we thought, but the breaking point came unexpectedly. It was a warm evening when Jake received a call from the hospital. Max's condition had taken a sudden turn for the worse. A dangerous infection had set in. Jake's world shattered. Racing to the hospital, he found Max pale and weak, hooked to machines that beeped tirelessly. The doctors were cautious but hopeful, giving Jake a fragile thread of optimism. That night, as Jake sat by Max's bedside, Karen appeared at the door. Her presence was chilling, calm and collected, but with a steely edge. I came to check on your son, she said softly, almost mocking. I hope he recovers. I wouldn't want any more accidents. Jake's fist clenched. Why are you here? Karen's eyes gleamed with something unreadable. Because you're becoming a problem. For me, for the HOA, for this neighborhood. Jake stared at her, fury rising. You're the problem. She smiled coldly. "Careful, Jake. This fight will cost you everything." Karen turned and left, leaving a silence that rang louder than any threat. In the days that followed, Jake and his allies gathered their evidence: documents, emails, photographs. The community's fear began to crack. Neighbors whispered their own stories of Karen's manipulations and cruelty. Jake organized a neighborhood meeting, this time outside the HOA, open to everyone. The turnout was bigger than expected. Faces, once hesitant, now full of resolve. When Jake spoke, his voice steady, the room listened. He laid bare Karen's deceit, the tampered footage, the threats, and the plan to force residents out for profit. Tensions exploded. Karen's supporters fought back fiercely, but the tide was turning. Then, as the meeting neared its peak, a startling announcement came over the loudspeaker. A police officer had arrived with a warrant for Karen's arrest. Evidence of her tampering with surveillance, intimidation, and the sealed lawsuit had finally surfaced, thanks to Jake's persistence and some brave whistleblowers. The room erupted in stunned silence, then applause. Jake looked toward the exit, where Karen was being led away, her mask shattered completely. Max, though weak, smiled faintly from the hospital bed when Jake called him. "We're going to be okay, buddy," Jake whispered. But as the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief, Jake couldn't shake one lingering fear. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Karen's arrest sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. The once untouchable HOA president, the woman who had ruled with an iron fist and silenced dissent for years, was now facing charges that could land her behind bars for a long time. The news spread quickly, and for a moment, it seemed the nightmare was finally over. Jake stood outside the hospital, watching Max regain strength day by day. The boy's resilience was a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that hope could survive even the fiercest storms. But as the days passed, the neighborhood began to change in unexpected ways. Some residents celebrated, openly voicing their relief and support for Jake. Others retreated behind closed doors, fearful of what more might be uncovered. One afternoon, Jake received a package with no return address. Inside was a folder filled with documents, financial records, correspondence, and a note that read simply, "The truth runs deeper than Karen." His heart pounded. Was Karen the tip of the iceberg? Who else was involved? The mysterious envelope hinted at a shadowy network, operating behind the scenes. Jake shared the documents with Mia and Lisa. They revealed secret deals between Karen's closest allies and outside investors, plans for development that disregarded community well-being, personal gain at any cost. The fight was far from over. But before Jake could act, the hospital called with news that shook him to his core. Max's infection was worsening. The doctors warned that without immediate surgery, the boy's life could be at risk. Jake stayed by Max's side throughout the grueling operation, hours stretching into an eternity. When the surgeon finally emerged, exhaustion and hope mingled. In Jake's eyes, the surgery was successful. The doctor said, "Max is a fighter, but he'll need time and care." Tears of relief streamed down Jake's face. After everything, the threats, the lies, the fight, his son was going to live. That night, as Max slept peacefully, Jake sat alone, the weight of the documents heavy in his lap. The neighborhood's darkness was far from lifted. Corruption ran deep, and there were powerful people who wanted the truth buried. But Jake was ready. With Mia and Lisa by his side, he began organizing a community coalition to demand transparency, reform, and justice. They reached out to local journalists, sharing the evidence, and inviting them to uncover the full story. The neighborhood was awakening. Then, just as Jake felt the first rays of hope breaking through, a knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find a woman he didn't recognize, her expression serious. "I'm Detective Ramirez," she said, flashing her badge. "We're reopening several cases connected to Karen and her associates. Your evidence has been crucial." Jake nodded, a cautious relief washing over him. Justice was beginning to move, but as the detective left, Jake couldn't shake a final chilling thought. The note in the package had warned him. The truth runs deeper than Karen. Was there more darkness lurking beneath the surface? More. Secrets yet to be revealed. For now, Jake focused on Max's recovery and rebuilding their lives. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of a longer, harder fight for the soul of their community, and he was ready.